Defeat is written in every ruin of battered Berlin. We treasure these few pictures of the German capital. They're rare and hard to come by. And the time we see more of them will be a great day for British newsreels. British bombs, American high explosive, and Russian shells have made Berlin a fitting graveyard for Hitler's bones. From Berlin went out the orders which plunged Europe into war in 1939. Now, in a far different Berlin, Field Marshal Keitel, Chief of the German High Command, arrives at Russian headquarters to sign the last act of unconditional surrender. After this, it'll be a tough job for any future German to argue that the Wehrmacht wasn't absolutely and utterly defeated. Luftwaffe General Stumpf also signed on the dotted line. A Russian delegation looked on approvingly while Air Chief Marshal Tedder signed. The act of surrender was then signed for Russia by Marshal Zhukov, who smashed the Germans outside Moscow in 1941. In the serene loveliness of the Alps, the United States 7th Army opened up an hotel packed with as mixed a bag of high personages as you could find anywhere in Europe. Among them was the wife of Dr. Schussnig, former Austrian Chancellor, and their child born in captivity. A particularly interesting occupant of this high-class concentration camp was Fritz von Thyssen. With him was his wife. Thyssen put up the money for Hitler's first bid for power. Later, the Führer got too big to handle, and the Thyssens found themselves brushed off. Then there was General Halder and his wife, a top ranker of the German High Command. He was probably imprisoned for trying to teach Hitler to be a general. Another ex-Hitler stooge was Nicholas Horthy, son of the Nazis' puppet dictator of Hungary. There was, however, at least one German there with a clean record, Pastor Niemoller. A determined opponent of the Nazis and all they stood for, he suffered years in prison for his courage. Some British prisoners were being held here, reportedly for use as hostages. Among them were Captain Elphinstone, nephew of the Queen, Lieutenant Alexander, a relative of Field Marshal Alexander, Lieutenant Lord Lascelles, son of the Princess Royal, and Lieutenant John Winant, son of the American ambassador in London, Europe's strange hotel. Surrender in Norway. Here you get full view of a scheming Nazi planning to survive. Air Commodore Dorval sets a splendid example. It's as plain as a pikestaff. These blackguards are out to play us for suckers. The way they smile, they'll probably try to be co-belligerents next to declare war on Japan. Now's the time to remember that famous prediction. The Junkers will trick you yet. Will they? This was Oslo's welcome to the first British party to enter the town since 1940. We were mobbed in an amazing way, a newsreel cameraman writes. German police guards put on the usual friendly act, while we were being nearly pulled to pieces in the enthusiasm. It was much the same when the British airborne troops entered the capital of Denmark. It was a gala day for the town, its first since the Germans took over in the early days of the war. Members of the Danish resistance movement, armed and supplied by the RAF, rounded up the local quislings. The Navy's here, too. HMS Birmingham was first into Copenhagen Harbor. Further along the quayside are the cruiser Dido and destroyers Zealous, Zephyr, Zest, and Zodiac. Boy meets girl, but she's keeping his name under her hat. King Christian of Denmark, freed from a palace prison, drives to the first opening of the Danish Parliament for 5 years. found in harbor in Copenhagen were the German cruisers Prinz Eugen and Nuremberg, the only heavy warships in the German Navy still undamaged. A spot of action against the Royal Navy might have done him a world of good. The cameraman who took these pictures reports that the Germans prevented him by force from going on board. Another sample of arrogance in defeat. Field Marshal Montgomery had a tumultuous welcome in Copenhagen. He drove through the city along a 6-mile route of jubilant citizens. Said Monty, the Danish freedom fighters have been second to none. We count them all among the Allied soldiers. The Channel Islands, scene of a great deliverance and yet another German surrender. Captain Lieutenant Arnim Zimmermann, 23 years old and arrogantly proud of being a Nazi, visits the British destroyer Bulldog. He came to ask our terms for an armistice and went back with a flea in his ear to tell his chief, Admiral Hufmeier, that it was unconditional surrender or else. On the quarterdeck of the Bulldog, 6 hours later, General Heine signed the unconditional surrender of all German forces in the islands on behalf of his chief. When he signed, Brigadier Snow said to him, "You will cause all German flags in the Channel Islands to be hauled down." "Jawohl," said General Heine. At St. Peter Port, Guernsey, and wherever British Tommies landed, huge crowds hurried from their homes to give them a welcome. Heroes of some of the war's toughest fighting get some idea of the gratitude ordinary folk feel towards them. Final scenes of the long drama of the Channel Islands. Military etiquette, but it's eviction nonetheless. The only part of United Kingdom territory to be overrun by Germans, the Channel Islands suffered 5 years' misery under German rule. Our dear Channel Islands, as Mr. Churchill called them, are free again.